Hi, everyone. A very warm welcome to what is actually episode 60 of our show. Um, when we started this show in COVID, I'd never imagined that we would have the honor of hosting so many amazing guests and speak about so many topics that are influencing the kind of organizations that we're building. But here we are, a few years later, episode 60. And for those of you who've been following us over the last few weeks, you would know that we're doing a 4 episode special on what it means to be inclusive for people with disabilities. This is in collaboration with Richa Bansal of Sarthi. She's been guiding us and introducing us to our guests in this show. Today, I'm super excited because in the finale of this limited series, I have with me Arman Ali. Arman Ali started off in the HR function, like me and like perhaps many of you who are watching, but then moved on to becoming a disability rights advocate. And now he's the executive director of the National Center of Employment for People with Disabilities. Let me bring Arman on. Hi, Arman.
Hi, Shalini. How are you?
Good, and so happy to have you on the show. Thank you so much for joining.
Likewise, I think it's honor that you are having me as a finale on the. I think I've heard great things about the show, and my friend Firoz speaks very highly of you, and
Oh, that's
pleasure to
so
be here.
that's so sweet. So, Arman, before we begin, the more formal part of the conversation, what made you move from human resources to advocacy for disability? Just curious.
Yeah, Shalini, my role with Infosys, I was part of the HR team, but my responsibility was on primarily was diversity. I was looking into hiring of people with disability and their onboarding and growth within the organization, trying to keep disability in the agenda of the leadership and so on. So I never kind of moved away from disability per se, but while working in Infosys, part of the HR team, I realized that there's so much more that is to be done. And when you work in a organized sector, the work limits you within a certain boundary. And I realized that there is a lot that is need to be done. There's many people with disability who just cannot be reached out through a particular organization. So and that's how I moved on from my corporate job to what I do as an executive director of the nonprofit NCP EDP.
Wow, fantastic. Arman, you've been in this world now for quite some time as well. Um, have things really shifted? So, for instance, has the Rights for People with Disability Act, the legal framework itself, has it made any difference in what you're seeing as the actual lived-in reality for people who are seeking employment?
So, Shalini, I think I see this as a glass half full, and there is a both yes and a no. The fact that we are talking here right now because there is a change, and you're talking about future, the future of work, and you're considering disability as part of it, shows that there's a change. Um, and over the last 2 decades, I think we have made good strides in terms of disability right. India has one of the most progressive disability legislation, which talks about disability almost in all aspect, whether it is employment or whether it is education or accessibility in general. Protecting people with disabilities right, very progressive. I think one of the best game-changing law in the world, and this would not have been possible without the kind of change that we've gone through in last 2 decades. People with disabilities, at least in the urban and some semi-urban spaces, are able to articulate their thoughts. They are able to express themselves better. This lot of use of technology has made things easier for a certain section of people to at least try and dive into the issue of disability. Technology is a great enabler, and I think communication is also very critical. So it helps you communicate, participate in certain activities. So it makes it a little more better space in terms of kind of finding a space for people with disability by finding a seat on a table. But there's a lot that is need to be done, and one step at a time, I think.
You said a little while ago that we have some of the most progressive legislation.
Yes.
Frankly, to be honest, before we started this series, I'm kind of embarrassed to say I hadn't read, uh, the act itself. I read it in preparation of our conversation, actually. So maybe for people who are just joining in, if you could share a little bit about the background of the act and what's the game changer piece about it.
So, Shalini, you said you're embarrassed that you're I mean, many people with disabilities don't know about it, and that's the biggest drawback. I think the biggest disadvantage that people with disabilities have, when you're not aware about your own rights and entitlements, and your what the constitution how does it uh, protects you, or what kind of rights and duties that you have. For persons with disability, I think lack of awareness is the biggest hurdle, the biggest barrier, and that causes disability is lack of awareness. And when there's a lack of awareness about disability, it creates an attitude which is kind of a hurdle, and you always look at things in a way which is very stereotyped. Coming back to the law, the Rights of Persons with Disabilities Act, India ratified the UNCRPD, that is United Nations Convention on Rights of Persons with Disability, in 2007, and then you know by law it requires you to change your own country's legislation, which will affect disability. So for the first time, in education, the law says that reasonable accommodation has to be provided to every student with disability, and accommodations which may be very individualized, not like a straight jacket for everything, kind of everyone kind of a thing. The law is very clear about that all education institutions, whether it is funded by the state or recognized by the state. Just mind you, when it says recognized,
Yeah.
almost every
Everyone gets covered. Yeah.
yes is covered, cannot deny education to students with disabilities. It has to promote inclusive education. It has to start inclusive education. Um, and and then when it comes to employment, it says there is a reservation. I'm not going on the part of the reservation, like in education there is 5%, there's 4% reservation in
Yeah.
government, in employment and education subsequently. For private sector, it says any establishment which has more than 20 employees must have a equal opportunity policy, and this policy must be registered with the state commissioner for persons with disabilities office, wherever that organization is located. Now, if you look at equal opportunity policy, it doesn't mean that you are providing a quota for a person with disability. All you need to ensure that basis of the person's disability, you are not discriminating her or him, but you create that environment that the person is coming to do the task which is assigned to the person, and adds to your revenue, and also subjected to appraisals or whatever you call it, review from time to time. Another thing which the law is talking about is reasonable accommodation. Reasonable accommodation to people with disabilities, and also, I must again reiterate it, not all disabilities are visible, and so there is a big spectrum. There's in 21 categories of disabilities are recognized by the law, the Rights of Persons with Disabilities Act, and reasonable accommodation, according to them, people may need work from home, people may need flexible work hour, people may need resting time doing work, but that doesn't change the person's KRA. The KRA remains the same. How the person is able to finish the task assigned within the time line is that person's responsibility and duty. um, Things like use of technology or accessible infrastructure, um, and so on and so forth. So I think these are the the most important thing which is there in the Rights of Persons with Disabilities Act. And the law also talks about that all products and services, including infrastructure and transportation, will be made accessible for people with disability. The law said that within 5 years of the law, but we had COVID and something or the other kept happening, so disability kind of drops out of the agenda. And again, I will say there's such acute lack of awareness about disability in general, that people are scared about it. People think that it's a hazard. So if you have a person with disability come and work with you, or a person with disability come to your restaurant or come to your business establishment, there could be an hazard, there could be a problem. So they try to keep away from the issue. So I think also, another game changing provision that the law has, that it makes discrimination of public of persons with
Yeah.
disability. Yeah, it's a crime.
Jail
It's a
time, I saw.
yeah,
Is that
yes, yes,
correct?
yeah. Section 92. So if you are humiliating or insulting a person with disability, or because of his or her disability in public view, it may invite you jail for 6 months to 5 years. In also, financial implications
Yeah.
like penalty
Yeah.
is imposed. Um, so I think this broadly is kind of quite game changing, but unfortunately people are not aware about these laws. It's not part of the compliance that we have. Like, you cannot. So if you look at compliance, if you just imagine, if you don't have GST, will you be able to run your business? Or so, but if you are not a disabled friendly infrastructure, you're able to run
Yeah.
your business and so on. So I think compliance, and also I think corporates and business houses are not aware about these provisions. Otherwise, I don't think they have any issue in terms of making their facility or businesses, or the recruitment
Yeah.
policy or recruitment practices friendly for people with disability. Because when you hire somebody, that person comes and add revenue to your organization. They're
Yeah.
not being paid, a certain salary for as a charity. Likewise, if any person with disability is coming to your business to buy a product or service, they're paying for it. They're not paying a concessional rate, but you're paying at par, and also add value. So I think these provisions, and India is a large market, Shalini. And I think the world is looking at India because of its size and the kind of people we are. And very interestingly, Shalini, we hold the highest number of people with disability in the world. And I think the data of 2011 says 2.68 crore,
Yeah.
but
I
it's
saw
been
that.
13 years now, and we have and when this census was done in 2011, India only identified seven categories of disability. So from seven we have become 21, and
Yeah.
it's 12, 13 years. And just imagine, if we have another census, this figure will go at least 5 to 7%, and that will make at least 10 to 12 crores of people in India are person with disability. They have families, they have friends, they have siblings. So when they come to have a meal in a restaurant, they will go to a restaurant which is accessible for people with disability. So if they are staying in a hotel, they will only stay where the person with disabilities will go. So it's, you don't drop out. So I think so excellent provisions in the law, and I think there's a need to create a mass mission mode awareness about these provisions, so that our businesses, our practices, people with disability are aware about it, and include disability friendly features in whatever they do. And I'm taking advantage of your medium to spread a little more awareness. So I went into little
No,
details.
delighted. And Armana, I think you were right on the fact that I think people would have a positive intent if
Yeah,
they
of course.
understood and knew more. That's my sense, just being part of this,
Okay.
organizational world. I think there is a lot of needle movement that will happen just by a better understanding of what is possible. Like, for
Exactly.
instance, I mean, I will say that through the course of these four, episodes, including today's, I have learned a lot about the role that technology can play to
True.
facilitate, because I think a lot of us haven't understood what technologies are available and the extent to which technology can facilitate work that happens with people who may otherwise find it challenging, including people who are visually challenged. We had Madhubala Sharma on our show last time. She spoke about how she and other blind low vision people use technology in such sophisticated ways. And of course she also educated me on the importance of all of us writing alt text when we put up something. So there's just so much learning that I think it's so much change that'll come just by people understanding. And I'm going to pick your brains a little bit, Arman, on what you said a little while ago about reasonable accommodation. Can you share more about some examples of what reasonable accommodation is all about? Because I think that's very central to building an inclusive workplace.
No, work from home is a reasonable accommodation. Flexible working hours is hybrid mode of working is a reasonable accommodation. I use a wheelchair myself, so if I join an organization and the organization is not accessible to say, and it requires a little modifications here and there, which is not an undue duress, kind of expenditure on the organization, where you have to spend more money uh, to make these changes than the salary of that employee. You might as well make the changes. Like it may require to put a ramp, give me a particular kind of a chair, or making the washroom a little more, the door wider, or changing some fittings here and there. It is small changes sometimes, and sometimes they are large changes. It may require that you have to install a elevator. Um, you know, Buying a software for somebody who's visually impaired to help them work on the system, uh, sign language interpreter, maybe a room or a space where people who have a blood disorders can rest when they are tired. uh, Very
Yeah,
small modifications, which really does everybody needs. I don't think it is exclusive for people with disability.
yeah,
Sometimes anyone who may not have a visible disability or may not have a disability per se, they also want to lie down because of not feeling well, or
yeah.
just want to de-stress for some time, and so on. I think, and there are many examples of a reasonable accommodation that way. Somebody can shadow your work. You have, how do I say it? For example, if you want to have, somebody to talk to about your, kind of work that you do, which needs support, so that can happen. One thing, I think reasonable accommodation is the way forward, and there's a large number of community, including women and LGBTQ, elderly people who are senior people who come with health condition. Everybody needs it, and we do provide reasonable accommodation in all our employees on everyday basis. But the fact that we don't acknowledge it and we don't put it as part of our practice, as part of our policies, it goes unnoticed otherwise.
Yeah.
Uh, and then there are practices which is part of the law, which is mandatory, like your maternity leave and so on. But I think we all make adjustments and changes for our colleagues, employees, and team members.
Very well said, Arman. Because, as you said a little while ago, not all disabilities are immediately obvious.
Yeah,
And I think now in the expanded category, you have hemophilia, sickle
yeah,
cell, and many others,
yeah.
autism, which may not be immediately obvious, but that still means that
Mental health conditions.
mental health conditions.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I think the WHO says every fourth person in the world has a mental health issue.
yeah, yeah,
It may
yeah.
not be obvious. It may be a little anxiety here and there and so. But we all
Yes.
need accommodation. We all need support. I think everybody needs kindness. It's not that it is exclusive for people with disability and or particular kind of community that come. Everybody needs kindness. It helps
So,
everybody.
actually, on that note, Arman, let me ask you, like, you work with so many organizations across the country. Do you feel that the moment a team becomes more inclusive, and that, there's so many different dimensions of diversity, people with disabilities is one such dimension, but the moment a team becomes more inclusive in its infrastructure as well as in its mind, accepting of difference, do you feel its culture begins to shift?
Of course, it does. I have seen there have been such examples where I will give an example of this. One of our Helen Keller awardees. who is based out of Bhavnagar in Gujarat. Microscience, they supply some parts to ISRO and DRDO and stuff, and 60% of his employees are persons with disabilities. And I have personally visited his manufacturing unit. It's, I think, in a small, humble place like Bhavnagar, it's about, you drive from Ahmedabad, but takes 4 hours. You have an industrial unit which is friendly. I mean, people with disability who have a locomotor disability and other disability, they come there on their own. The entire facility is made friendly for people with disability, including safety. And he have employees who are working with him for last 2 decades, and they've grown over a period of time. It's great, and you really don't have to look at Delhi and Gurgaon and Pune and Hyderabad or Bangalore for this kind of inclusive practices. It's happening across the country, and most of this we don't know, because something which you don't see, you don't believe.
Yes.
and and
Yes.
and, and something which you, and then also you have a fear about, where something which you don't know, like COVID, you didn't see it, but you didn't know you get it. There's so much of fear, and it's and so on. And likewise, it's like a rumor has it, so people with disability needs to get into that opportunity where they are seen, when they are interacted with, and that's what will change
What will
perceptions.
change? Absolutely agree. So I'm just going to read some of the comments. Thank you guys for joining in. Sharad says, please share agencies or NGOs who can help me hire people with these issues. I'm assuming it means people with disabilities. And he's given his email address. Sharad, one of the problems of this platform is that we don't necessarily, not all comments will always stay. So just to be, doubly sure, maybe message me or maybe message Arman, and we'll start a connection. I'm sure if you message Arman on LinkedIn, he'll be able to help you out a little bit. I definitely know Sarthi's helping, and I think Arman, your organization also would be of help. Harshal, hi. Harshal says fantastic awareness session, especially around the law and the act put in place. Vipin says thanks for sharing. Thank you, Vipin, for joining. And then we have a comment from a LinkedIn user which says very pertinent points brought out by Arman, as always. More such sessions specifically focusing on employment and mainstreaming of PWDs in the workplace, especially manufacturing sector, is the need of the hour where work from home is impossible. A lot more sensitization of the industries and corporate houses required to remove the mental blocks. And I think this is a great place for us to jump in next, Arman. What do you think are some of the barriers for people with disabilities to, even get a job in the first place? Accommodation and being able to thrive in the workplace, of course, super, super important, but that's, the logical next step. But what are the challenges they face in getting the right job?
The two things, I'll just take a step back, Shalini. One, there are challenges of getting employment for person with disability. Is there is lack literacy. Getting the education for person with disability is a Herculean task. So if you don't have the kind of qualification and skill set that you want from for a job, how will you get a job?
Yeah.
Yeah, so then every single day, there's somebody or the other reach out to us that we want to hire people with disability. Can you give us a database? Can you send people with disability? But most of the time we fail. And the biggest challenge, as you ask, I think the biggest challenge for persons with disability to get a job is migration. How do you may have somebody who has a BE in computer science, is from Bhavnagar, for example, and has been offered a job in Pune, and with a disability, may the person may not be able to move out immediately to a new city altogether all by himself or herself to find a job. So migration becomes a huge challenge. One, because of the environment. The environment is so hostile because you have to find an accommodation for your residential need. has
Fair.
to, has is it accessible or not? I struggle. I mean, I come from a fairly well exposed kind of a background in terms of
Yeah.
work and managing my life, but I struggle. I struggle. I live in Delhi alone, and I struggle because finding a house is accessible. Transport, whether it is metro, whether it is any public transport, whether you are using an aggregator who's of cabs. So, this entire ecosystem is so not friendly for people with disability. We spoke about the law, and I mentioned that the law requires that all your infrastructure, including transport, needs to be accessible. So one cannot work without the other. So today, you see, Sharad wants to hire people with disability. He has the intention, but people who want to join him may be 1,000 kilometer away from him. How do they reach? Even if they come to the city, then there are many other things which fall into the place. So I think corporates and employers play a large role in changing the landscape. I think to break down these challenges of education not having the right skill set, there is a need to invest in disability through your DEI or through your CSR. If you can get people to, with a certain bare minimum eligibility criteria that you set, then if you can invest people who can come and learn what you do, learn about the work culture, learn about what kind of changes needs to be done, what kind of competencies people with disability needs to bring onto the table, what kind of support that is needed on from the employer. That interaction need to happen. And I think with India is a large country, Shalini, and 70% of people with disability are in rural areas. Looking at self-employment point of view, looking at work from home, looking at promoting entrepreneurs with disability. So there's a lot that needs to start to start that discourse around employment, and it just not mean that you need to be in a particular setup for a thing. And the manufacturing is another example for thing. But wherever you are, if the manufacturing units, most of them are in SEZ areas, which is in the outskirts, looking within the community, within that area, hiring people if they need some training, training them, starting an apprenticeship program, internship program for specifically for people with disabilities. So I think some of the solutions I've also mentioned, but challenge remains education, acquiring the kind of education or skills that you want. And second, once you get the education, also moving to a place of employment with inaccessible environment, like, and I'm not even starting the
Yeah.
workplace, it is accessible or not. Even before that, you face so many other challenges, and that's how we are where we are.
And I'm actually going to pick something that you spoke about earlier. You said that when people reach out to you and they're asking for almost like a platform that connects roles with people with disabilities. So, are there such platforms available, like
There
a
are. So
non-equivalent?
there are. So there is PM Dusk, like Department of Empowerment of Persons with Disability. They've started this program under the guidance of Honorable Prime Minister, under his leadership. So PM Dusk is one portal that's been started where that all the jobs are being posted by corporates, and people with disabilities are applying for it. There are other organizations who are doing work. There is Youth for Job, who has a portal where AI is helping people to map jobs. So that's another thing. There's Enable India, there is Vishesh. So those specifically work on employment aspect of persons with disability, kind of skilling them, building the capacity, making them interact with corporates, being the interface between the employer and the persons with disability. We at NCPDP, we are largely policy organizations. We will go and talk to the corporate, build the capacity about equal opportunity policy, reasonable accommodation law, sensitization, and so on. But we don't directly work in terms of linking persons with disability directly. But we have partners. We have strong partnership with all the people who I just mentioned. But I think somewhere, it's I in my recent interaction for the last 3 months, I have been talking to four large MNCs. They're just being. I mean, I'm having calls with them back and forth. Each one of them has spoken to me about two, three, or four times. I've visited them, international large companies, and they have the infrastructure in place. They have accessible infrastructure in place. They're still hesitant of having people with disabilities come and work with them. Because you haven't started it, because you
Haven't
don't know how
started.
to start
Correct,
it.
correct. Yeah,
So
yeah.
I think this leap of faith can only happen if you start having a internship program. If you're having those kind of kind of issues in terms of, because you don't see yourself to be an expert on disability. And to be honest, you don't need to be an expert on disability. You just need to look at the policies. You just need to have the practices which is not discriminatory towards anybody, irrespective of gender, disability, nationality, caste, creed, religion, and so on. I think it is as simple as that. So I think, and this will help people with disability also understand that your disability is not the qualification. Your disability is your
Yes,
ability.
yes, yes. And
And
this is such a important point. So, by the way, I firmly believe that the future of leadership is inclusive. I firmly believe it. And the business case for that is that as the world gets more and more complex, and which is unavoidable, undeniable, you need better solutioning. And better solutioning comes when you have people who've had different kinds of life experiences come into the room together and be able to innovate solutions, which is not possible when you have people who are from more or less a similar kind of background. So I think the business case for inclusion for me is that I know that there are many other more concrete metrics. Like I know Richa also spoke about how the attrition rates are lower, how engagement levels are higher. So of course there's all of that, but I'm just saying from a organizational perspective, it's very clear we need people with different life experiences in the organization. In being able to lead teams like that, it's an education for managers and leaders themselves in being able to see different perspectives. The capacity to take different perspectives is a critical leadership skill, particularly of the future, because you are going to be operating with far more, stakeholders than ever before, just because of the way workforce ecosystems are getting redesigned. So I am absolutely convinced that the capacity to be an inclusive leader is, uh, that capacity and skill is fundamental to leading tomorrow's organization. And that's why it's on the future of.
completely agree with you, Shalini. I think you are right. And I personally believe that any organization which is not inclusive, particularly for persons with disabilities, will not cease to exist in the next 25 years. I mean, that is that critical, because disability cuts across everyone. And when I say don't cease to exist, is not in terms of hiring people with disability. It's about your business. Is your business accessible for people with disability or not? If is your product that you are making is accessible for people with disability or not? I'm
Yeah.
talking about 1 billion people in this world who are disabled. 1 billion, and then they're growing, and and
Yeah.
they're not alone. They come with their families.
Yes.
And so it's a large business model, and you have to look at a sustainable business which takes along everybody. You cannot say that I'm not selling my product to X or Y. I'll only make this kind of product. So there's a lot of this is shifting,
Yeah.
and I'm sure the future of work will be inclusive with the help of technology, with MI and
Absolutely.
AI. I think it will be. I
Yeah.
think your
Yeah.
identity will not be will not be something which will create barrier. It will only add value. So if you are a
Absolutely.
woman, if you are
Yeah.
a person with disability, if you're LGBTQ, if you're from any other marginalized community, you come and contribute to anybody or in any way,
Yeah.
it adds value. You bring something onto the table, and it can only happen if you look at business, and if you look at business, and if you look at everybody sustaining it, you will take everybody along, and that's, I think, the philosophy which will work as we move ahead towards a future which is bright for all of us.
Armand, can you tell me a little about the Helen Keller Awards?
Yes. Yes, thank you. I was hoping that you asked me that question. I think Helen Keller Award is something which is the most prestigious award that we give in the disability sector. And this year is the 25th edition. NCPDP started in 1996. And imagine 25 years from
Yeah.
we talked about employment of people with disability.
Mm.
And there are organizations who are large multinational companies to a small town, like I talked about this microsign, one of the first awardees that we had from Bhavnagar, and I visited him in 2020 two or 20, yeah 23 I think so, just to see that what does he do, like 20 years has he
Yeah.
grown. And like I was like blown away, like it kind of, we started small and he sustained the work. So do we recognize organizations who are promoting employment for people with disability for their best practices? It's not the number, what is the number that you have of employee, what number of employees with disability you have, but your practices. So we also recognize employees with disability, we recognize uh, NGOs, civil society organizations, government. Union Bank of India, for example, one of our awardees for the Helen Keller Award 2023, uh, uh, has almost 3% of employees which are people with disability. Infosys, Wipro, Tata, Amazon. I mean, all of them. And not that you apply and you get this award. People apply year on year, and there's a hard kind of a scrutiny that we do, and that's how this is a very cutthroat competition that happens each year around December. And so the idea is not to give an award, just to keep employment of persons with disability in the discourse, so that it doesn't die. So we look at a large, sectoral participation from manufacturing to services to hospitality to ITS services, entrepreneurs with disabilities, people with disability who are running their own business, or people with disability who are part of any organizations and are doing exemplary work. So we recognize all of them. So there are about 15 awards that we give out every year, and we will be, I think, in the month of July or August, we'll roll out the nominations for this year's. And this has remained something which we keep looking at as a best practices, which is coming. When you see large and small enterprises who are inclusive in terms of employment for people with disability, I think it gives a lot of cultural thing for other people, and it cuts across the country. It's not limited to there's somebody in West Bengal from a small district in Asansol got an award year before last for employing about 50 people in his manufacturing unit about something, making some sustainable thing, and many more examples like that. And these stories, these narratives of people with disabilities and their allies needs to be talked about. People need to know about these things, and that's how we want to run it. It's more of for the cause, so that it doesn't die in this hustle bustle of the world. So that's the idea.
And in a moment, I'm going to ask you to share some best practices you've observed over these 25 years, but I'm going to read some of the comments. Hi, Pinaki. Thank you for joining. Pinaki says, equity over equality takes the front seat. And I'm going to ask you, what are your views, Arman?
No, yes, I think so. I agree with the statement. Equity is important. I think for us to look at disability right from your drawing board or any other marginalized, community which needs support, makes a lot of difference, and it also cuts cost. Providing an infrastructure change after hiring somebody will look as a cost, and look at things like you're doing, going out of your way, do something for a particular one employee, but there are other employees who are already in need of something similar, or may not be a disability support, but otherwise. So looks a little biased sometime, but if you are incorporating all needs of all people together right from your drawing board when you start something, I think it takes care of your expenses, and it talks about equity and then not equality. I think that's the way forward.
Pinaki also has another interesting question, which I'm going to read out. What are the quantitative measures that can be introduced to remove unconscious bias or the mini me syndrome from the recruitment process, especially for PWD hiring and neurodiverse hiring? Secondly, post hiring, what all critical measures can we take into consideration to make them thrive other than the infrastructure adjustments?
I think the second question is it needs investment. How you're investing in building their capacity in terms of the subject matter expertise that you want them to have. They need investment in building their capacity, training, the work culture. How inclusive is there? How are you looking at your policies which are not discriminatory towards persons with disability? Decisions around promotion of disability inclusive work culture cannot be arbitrarily. It has to be a part of your policy. It has to come from the leadership to the right at the bottom level of leadership. It has to be there. It just cannot be some because of a person who's there as a leader and wants to hire some persons with disability, and then after the person moves out and then the same treatment is not meted out to the person. So I think this cannot be a personality driven thing. The personality or a leader can come and start an initiative, but we have to ensure that it is ingrained in your policy, in your appraisals, in your training, in capacity building, in your procurement policy, for example. How do you ensure that whatever you are procuring for your organization or whoever is your vendor are giving you stuff which is friendly for people with disability? Or for that matter, any other person who needs any support may not have a disability, but from a gender perspective, from other cultural issues, or likewise. So I think looking at these small things which will change the culture of the organization will help sustain and let people grow in terms of, and reasonable accommodation plays a very important role for a person to grow. Not everybody can can maybe take a call like this. If somebody who's deaf, how are you providing that accommodation, that we will have closed captioning, or we will have sign language interpreter and so on. So these are the few things that can make a lot of difference.
And I think one of the beauty about technology is it's democratizing so much.
Yeah.
Technology costs have been dropping, so what earlier may have been not so easy for at least smaller organizations to consider, today technology is available at a fraction of the cost. So I think a lot of those shifts are very enabling. And just to the first question which Pinaki asked, are there measures to remove unconscious bias? I'm wondering, like there is
So
very
yeah.
standard unconscious bias training in when gender is concerned. It's I mean, pretty much every organization does some version of it. Effective, not effective, another topic, but does some version of it. Wondering if it'll be helpful to have something in that world, to introduce people to bias while working with people with disabilities.
I think this to do an internal audit of your practices is very important, and how you build capacity of your team. And I have seen this culture sometimes that the leadership stays away from these kind of trainings and says, okay, so that level of leadership can go, and then they keep themselves out of it, saying that it's okay with me, it's important thing to do, and it's a good thing to do, kind of stuff. So I think so that's where it becomes very arbitrary sometimes. Today what I am saying here on this LinkedIn live with you on the Future of Work show, and I'll say something else tomorrow on another show. I think it cannot be
Sustainable, yeah.
accepted. It cannot be accepted. So I think for us to look at our practices, what practices that we have right now, to see if any of those practices are creating any barrier for people with disability, or is it discriminating towards any person with disability, or so that's need to be removed. Need to bring in more reasonable accommodation, more equal opportunity policy perspective, and person with disability needs to know what, and this has to be done through a dialogue. It just cannot be you know dropped like a box in the room, and so the person with disability should know that being hired for an X role, and this role has X responsibilities, and I can only grow if I complete this in this time frame. And so this culture has to start. And while I'm trying to do my work. I should not face barrier, not be thinking about that I can't go to the washroom, so I keep holding the whole day because when I go home. And how do you expect the person to perform? Maybe this, maybe a rocket scientist, but he will, or she will also not be able to perform. Their basics are not into place.
You
When you
know,
worry, yeah,
that brings up so many memories because let me tell you that when I started my career, particularly in manufacturing facilities, women's bathrooms were not at all common. And
right.
most often, if you were at a manufacturing location at work, you'd have to go to the main office building, which would be somewhere, to even find, a washroom. The factory plant washrooms would not have a women's. So, I mean, I recognize that so well
So
because
it
I've
happens very often with people with disabilities. Like if you
yeah,
are in a building, so they'll say our accessible washroom is on the ground floor. You are on the fourth floor. Just
yes,
use the washroom, you
correct,
have to come
right,
down. You know,
right,
but when you made that building or procured that space or took it on lease through a private thing, you did not ensure that all at all level we need this accessibility, all washroom to be accessible for all
right,
gender. Small
yeah.
thing, but you will feel proud that we have an accessible washroom in every facility. One that can be used by everybody. So every washroom can be accessible if need be. So small basic hygiene question kind of makes you relate to a lot of stuff.
And now the question actually I'm so curious about. I mean, as someone who has the ringside seat on, what are best practices for inclusion, what are some of the practices that you've come across, perhaps in recent years in particular, or maybe even an older example, that you've personally found super inspiring and maybe all of us can learn for, in
No, I think looking, I'll be repeating myself. There is no rocket science for all this. Shalini. We do so many things, and I learned every day from people like you, and everybody is a leader. People who are working and employing people with disabilities, managers, and large multinational companies, startups, and so on. Such innovations, I think, all it needs to do that you have to ensure that your practice, whatever you do, your business is not discriminatory towards anybody. You have to imagine that the person with disability will be a user of your product, services, or you're part of your workforce, or your colleagues, or your client, or your boss. You have to imagine a 360-degree with that
right,
view. And for a few examples that I can say, if I could name, like Google, look at Infosys, look at Wipro, look at Union Bank of India is a PSU, but it has taken that thing of doing an internal audit, looking at their practices, what's need to be changed, how Microsoft, for example, you see this such a big organization. Look at their products, look at how they ensure accessibility in everything that they're trying to do. Microsign, I talked about in
yeah,
Bhavnagar. Also other manufacturing unit like the Worth Trust in Chennai. This small SMEs and MSMEs doing phenomenal work. Some of the employers, they don't even want to come and apply or any recognition they want. They do it because it's business for them. They don't have the time to come and apply for an award and so so that's where we want to play that role, that these narratives must come out. I'm very keen that people start internship and apprenticeship program for people with disabilities. Every large colleges, in big, whether it is IIM or IITs or anything, you'll find people with disability there. Smaller towns, smaller places, large organizations who have a large base, get people with disabilities come and intern, pay them a stipend, give them that exposure, let the leadership come and talk to them that how it is done, what is expected out of our employee, irrespective of your disability. This is what is expected, and we will be able to support you in XYZ, which is not an undue cost for us. Some of the cost can be bared mutually together. So I think what we need is to start a large program where people across the country from all spheres of life are able to expose to a work culture of in the organized sector or otherwise, be it an entrepreneur or a startup or a manufacturing unit or a IT company, hospitality, and so on and so forth. I think, to my mind, that's one of the things that we should do, and this has been some of the best practices that we have seen with a few organizations that we have been interacting from last 15 years or two or more.
thank you so much, Arman. I mean, I'm taking so many points right from the start when you spoke about the fact that maybe there isn't enough awareness of even the rights. both amongst organizations,
True.
because as you said, while there's no audit necessarily done, of course the legal provisions are there, but there isn't necessarily an audit done to people with disabilities themselves who may not know what their rights are and what is it that they can ask for. So there's that piece. Then the challenge of people with disabilities finding jobs which are the
Right.
right match for them. And
Right.
you spoke about many organizations that are facilitators in the process,
Right.
uh, including one of the portals that you spoke about. So just it reduces the friction in the system in a sense, where people with disabilities have access to at least information on what roles might be out there, to adopting an inclusive mindset, which as you said, right, starts right from both the physical infrastructure, the digital infrastructure that you create, as well as once people come on board, your ability to make reasonable accommodations for them in the workplace. You spoke about going over your people practices and making sure that they are non-discriminatory, the way they've been designed. And I really do like the very practical suggestion, which many people on this show have spoken about, that maybe one good place to start is just start small. Even an internship helps, because seeing is believing, and as people become more familiar with what is it like to work with people with different kinds of disabilities, uh, they learn in the process, and then they're able to do maybe an even better job with the next hire. There's just so much I'm taking from this conversation. I'm going to read one comment, and it's a question actually, and then I'm going to ask you for any thoughts that you have that you want our viewers to leave with. So this question comes from Worth Digitization Chennai. Thank you for joining us. Regarding creating awareness of the Disability Act, why not the organization supporting PWDs with the legal expert support conduct awareness programs for the PWDs and the corporates and organizations?
Yeah, I think it's a very important thing to do, and we do it all the time. Funding becomes a big problem. There's no, you don't get kind of support. Disability doesn't get kind of the money you need to do advocacy work for awareness. I think it's easier to raise money to distribute wheelchairs, which is also very important, or any other aids and appliances. But to do work like creating awareness about rights of people with disability, I think we don't get the kind of support. It's an everyday struggle to do that. Thank you for asking this question. And Shalini, I'll take advantage of your show and appeal people to please do invest in disability. Organizations like NCPEDP needs a lot of support. We are happy to collaborate and see how we can take this kind of work further, because disability is an evolving issue and there's a lot that is need to be done.
And sorry, we were just going to close, but I can't resist Pinaki's new comment because it makes so much sense. Quick example here: can we make this live session more inclusive for visually impaired people by giving a quick audio description introduction of the speakers, including how they look, what color apparel accessories they're wearing, what's behind them in the room, etc. So, Arman, you go first. I haven't done this before, but I'm going to take your lead. And
I am Arman. I'm a man. I go with the pronoun of he, him. I am wearing a large frame spectacle. I don't know. I'm brown screen. I'm wearing a dark green check shirt. In my background, there's a picture of late Sri Javed Abidi. And I have not very long, but not very short hair, like mid length.
all right, so I'm going to.
I also have a dimple on my left cheek.
Very nice.
Thank
So
you.
I'm going to go next. Shalini Lal. I am a woman. I go by the pronouns she, her. I have longish, frizzy hair. Uh, I'm wearing a white shirt and long dangling earrings. And I have behind me a virtual backdrop of an office setting. So, with that, thank you very much. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. Really appreciate it. Do stay in tune. Our next series is going to be on a very different topic, but one that I'm sure many of you might be interested in, which is how do we build cultures that are more you know, more able to make use of technologies like artificial intelligence and Gen AI. This, of course, comes at the backdrop of a research project that we at Uncube, which is me and my partner Papia, are doing along with Jaspreet Bindra, who is, as we know today, one of the leading experts on AI, Gen AI in India. And we are studying organizations which are ahead of the curve in their AI implementation process to see what is it that they are doing differently. So please stay tuned for that series, and thank you very much.